Good morning, everyone. I'm very proud to be here. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the organizers of the Zero Conference. I think it's fantastic. I was sitting in the audience earlier, and I said to myself, I could live here forever. So well done. And so I'm not going to bore you with data. I think everybody here is aware of the issue. So I'm not going to bore you with too much deep dive into digging in, but I'm just going to come from a doing perspective. So as a power developer in Africa, Genesis, and talking about investment in Africa, because at the end of the day, if we want to go green and go more biodiversity, then money has to come from somewhere. And I think that everyone is agreed that Africa is not rising. I think it is reason. So my quick talk today, I think it's going to be less than 5 minutes, is going to be about how can Africa leapfrog rather than go through the OECD path of biomass to dirty fuel and just jump over that straight into renewable. Genesis Energy, who are we? We have a vision to light up Africa one community at a time. I think that sounds like a cliche right now. But if you rewind to 12 years ago, that was a very boring topic. So at the time that Genesis was founded, and at the time that we realized that, damn, we got to light up this continent. And how do we do it? We have to bite the elephant one piece at a time. And so our vision statement is as much as a mission. So, good. The African continent. This huge piece of land, measuring over 83,000 kilometers of land, is an amazing continent. It's endowed with a lot of resources. We have, over 300,000 miles worth of hydro capacity on that continent. When you look globally into Africa in terms of population, today it's over 1.2 billion people. And the recent report by the UN indicates that by 2050, Africa will have doubled to over 2.5 billion people. And incrementally, every year thereafter, Africa is expected to add about 10% more human footprint into the continent. Sorry, into the Earth. So this is a very important continent. And it's a very critical topic today to talk about how can we best partner with Africa? How can Africa best encourage and induce investment from Norway, from Europe, and from our partners globally? What is the issue? Today, over 60%, that's over 600 million people, don't have access to modern form of electricity. The greatest chance they got is to go across the bush, cut down the tree, burn it for heat, and burn it for cooking. And so every day, there's a huge amount of emissions being added, and when you combine that with the issue of coal-fired plants as we have in Southern Africa region, specifically South Africa, you would find that the footprint is increasing. Now, so it's a big issue. Majority of those that bear the brunt of this are the women folk. The women folk in the rural communities, rather than spending time, having a better standard of living, they spend time walking miles just to fetch water. They spend time walking miles to cut down trees, to chop it up. So it's a very inefficient way, and of course the children, who are then supportive of their mothers, therefore bear the brunt of this. So there's a social issue to the underpowering of Africa, and there's also the climatic issue that, the more Africa continues to burn down bushes and forest, deforestation issues, the more that we have emissions coming out. Now, can we avoid this? Now, so this is some of the conversations that we're talking about on the issue. The issue creates the opportunity. So it's a big problem. You have 1.2 billion people, over 600 million don't have access to electricity. And so is the glass half full or half empty? So this creates, opportunity in itself. I'm not sure if the screen doesn't want me to talk. So we see the potential to leapfrog from this biomass and dirty fuel into real constructive green energy. The resources is there. The government currently, a lot of them are restructuring how they engage investors. The opacity in the power sector in Africa, it's been removed, so there's more transparency. And there are a lot of policy initiatives that are coming up to attract investment. So today, if you look at Europe and investment to renewable, I mean, Norway, for example, gets over 98% of its energy from hydro. I mean, I think that's amazing. I was walking day before yesterday at the airport, and I saw a big caption, a country powered by nature. And I was just very fixated on that in Africa we're so endowed with so much of these resources, from hydro to solar, geothermal, to wind, and really we could be one with nature. So therein lies the opportunity to do great business in Africa. But it's challenging. I mean, even for an African, we've developed projects in a few countries, in West Africa, in Central, and now we're going into the Southern African region. I tell you, it's a hand-to-hand combat. It's not a walk in the park. There's so much opacity, there's so much bureaucracy, and when you look at constructively, how can you invest $1 or 1 krona and eventually get it back? Just get it back. Sometimes it could be very challenging. So there's a challenge of finance. The depth of the capital market is still very limited. The financial sector is very small. So funding is an issue. And for green power, you need long-term funding. Today, in most African countries, you will find medium-term funding, 3 to 7 years. It's not sustainable. And then there's the issue of tariff. It's a big elephant. Investors come in, put in their money with the expectation that they can get returns, and they can get it decently. Of course, the opportunity is that you have double-digit investment in Africa, double-digit returns on investment. Now, that is very exciting, but you like to get it back. So this is a bit of a challenge. The tariff sometimes is still not very reflective of what the real cost is and what the expectations are. So this multiple challenges, inhibit investment and dissuade very keen investors in coming on board. So we say that there's risk about investing in Africa. So it's not about risk avoidance, it's about risk mitigation. So you see price and risk. We see sovereign risk. You see structural risk. But can these be mitigated? Are there commercially viable instruments out there? Do we have innovative financing solutions? Are there ways outside of the typical traditional funding, project finance structure, that can better attract investment? And this is some of the things that Genesis, we've been able to, together with our partners, General Electric, Anglo Corporation, Cummins, we've been able to walk around this matrix of risks that flow apart. But remember, risk is meant to act as a catalyst. If you can find practical mitigants out there that would ensure that the capital you invest delivers the result, which is a positive outcome of adding greener electrons to the grid, and you can actually collect your money at the end of the year, I think then you've been able to de-risk the business in question, and you've been able to feed yourself with a good project. And the good thing about Africa, as we've experienced, is that when you have very strong, credible local partners, sadly, some of the strong partners are not visible. So they don't have private jets, no fancy watches. But they're very competent, and they feel out there. And there's no point going to Africa to do business by yourself. I mean, quite frankly, you'll be walking in a landmine. So partnering with very credible, long-term thinking, very focused partners is a very, very good initiative to consider. And even for us as African companies investing in other countries in Africa, we go into these countries and we ensure that we find very credible local partners. And with these partners, we're able to walk, rather than walk in the dark, as you would, actually be well guided in how you design your projects, in how you de-risk them, and in how you interact with the key stakeholders in these communities. So, again, like I said, I'm going to keep this very short, and I'll welcome feedback from the audience. So there is a resolve, at least from Genesis' perspective. There's a resolve that, given the short lifespan that we have as humans, but as organization, we expect to be in infinity. The resolve is that entrepreneurs would best, together with government, with international investors, international organizations, will best enable this Africa Rising narrative. This idea that we can leapfrog from dirty fuel straight to clean energy, which does everybody favors. It creates jobs, creates income, it's balance for the planet. We're resolved that we can do this. But I must confess, up to this point, we haven't delivered one single electron of either hydro or solar. So over 98% of our capacity is gas-fired. But we call that clean power. It's still a lot better than what you have in diesel-fired plants, in biomass, and in coal. But we're working very slowly, but very, very surely into this green Africa Rising. So the risk is there, and there's no point putting that under the table. The issues to deal with when you do business in Africa. And I don't want to bore you with so many of them, and some of them, governments will be very unhappy if I say them. But the fact is that putting this risk on the table, putting the issues on the table, talking about them, very sincerely finding solutions that work, that will enable you to do this business and make money, because you have to make money. If you don't make money, it's not sustainable. And if it's not sustainable, then you're the United Nations. So we're not United Nations. We are commercial enterprises, especially as Genesis. Some of us here may not be. But the fact is that the business is there. So we strongly believe that if we look at the issues realistically, if you dimension the solutions practically, if you find the right partners, and if we have, yesterday we had a meeting with Northfund, and I said to them that the vision for Genesis, it's not a tactical one. It's not about investing in a project. That's great. Thank you for that. We can find that money to tactically invest in businesses, and we have that money. We have the big players, a small company doing big business with big partners. But what would be great would be to have a platform with Northfund that would create multiple deal flow, and that would be a catalyst for other players in the energy sector to copy exactly what we've done with Northfund and with other partners in Norway that we plan to have, and then create this epidemic level of investment. So I would say, please, don't be scared of the continent. We have very nice beers, as you know. Amazing weather, beautiful places to visit. Nature at its best. Of course, you have the rising issue of terrorism, but avoid those places. But it's a beautiful place, and it's nothing as good as doing business in a place that you enjoy, with people that you can call friends, and with a continent that fully embraces you. So, thank you so much for this opportunity. If there's any question, I'm happy to take it. Otherwise, I'll just walk away. No.